Now it's time for the mayor's report. Thank you. Okay, mayor's report. I want to use my report tonight to lay out the record on the Youth Front conversations and the technology and advanced industry overlay and the data center and battery storage questions. I've prepared a written narrative with the dates and documents behind everything I'm about to say. I'd encourage anyone who wants the detail to read it rather than rely on what's circulating online. 3 things: the timeline, several claims that are not accurate, and where I stand going forward. On January 13th, shortly after I took office, Councilmember Mike Hemphill and myself attended a Linn County Planning and Zoning meeting. We went for one reason. The agenda included whether people can live in campers full-time or not, and we have several residents who do. It was never discussed that night, but afterwards we did speak with one of the members of the P&Z board, and I can't remember their name, I don't know if you remember who it was, and it confirmed that it would not affect the incorporated city of Lynn Valley, so our citizens who live in campers were safe. While I was there, I did introduce myself around, first to the attorney that was there on an Evergy matter, and then second to Topher Philgreen, who was there for Youth Front. That was the first time I ever met him, not a friend, not a business associate, not a prior contact. When I emailed him 6 days later, his reply said he hadn't caught my name when we handed me his card. I want to be precise because it's been said I first met him in April after the county denied Youth Front's rezoning. That's backwards. That night, P&Z voted to recommend approval. The county commission didn't deny it until April 20th. Topher and I had lunch on January 22nd so I could learn what they were looking to do. That same afternoon, I contacted the city attorney that Youth Front had approached me about a possible annexation. I described the conversations as preliminary, said no commitments had been discussed, and asked for guidance on process, legal risk, and when informal conversations would become formal process under Open Meetings and Open Records Acts. The first substantive thing I did with this was put in front of our attorney. In February, Youth Front asked that the key participants sign an NDA. I told this city attorney. He questioned whether such an agreement could legally be signed, as it would violate city council members' right to voice his or her opinion, restrict the public's right to know, and separately rejected a proposal that Topher said on an executive session that would have violated COMA. We followed his direction. No NDA was ever signed. I did honor an informal request not to publicize another organization's undeveloped plans while they informed affected parties. That's discretion, not secrecy, and it commits the city to nothing. I want to explain how I'd handle this with anybody who walked through my door because I think that's the fairest test of whether I did something improper. Suppose someone comes to me next month about building a car wash. Before that's public, that person may need to talk to the landowner, to investors, to an engineer, to the utility, to businesses next door. They might ask me for some time to figure out whether the idea even works before it's in the paper. I'd give them that time, and so would most of you. Or suppose a developer comes to me about ground outside the city limits, maybe an affordable housing subdivision, maybe 3 to 5 acre residential lots, and says that if it pencils out, they might eventually ask to be voluntarily annexed. At that stage, they still have to evaluate the land, the financing, the infrastructure, whether there's a market, and what annexation would even require. Announcing it the next morning could wreck their property negotiations, start speculation about land nobody has bought yet, and stir up a fight over a project that may never even happen. In either case, I would respect the preliminary nature of that conversation. Now here's what that does not mean. It does not mean I promised anybody annexation. It does not mean I promised zoning, infrastructure, incentives, or approval. And it does not take 1 minute away from the public's right to participate before this council decides anything, because nothing can be decided without a public process. It means only this. I am not going to announce somebody else's half-formed idea before there is something concrete for this city and its residents to actually consider. That is exactly how I treated the early Youth Front conversations, the same way I treat a car wash. On May 12th, Youth Front submitted a draft of an annexation agreement. That draft was not accepted by the city attorney as legally appropriate, nor would any draft be considered until proper legal safeguards are put in place. Our attorney rejected Youth Front's terms. Nothing was signed, no annexation was approved, no further annexation agreement was submitted. On June 8th, in open session, I presented the TII overlay and said plainly that no project had been proposed, none approved, and this was a framework, not a deal. By May 28th, I was studying Minooka, Illinois' data center, probably before then, but that's the earliest record I have of it. I studied how they did data center and battery storage zoning, and on June 15th, I traveled there to meet with the village officials. The city paid the fees associated with that trip. Minooka had finished its approval process and had a project under construction. I wanted to test whether our safeguards were good enough. On June 22nd, I publicly reported the Manuka trip, and on June 23rd, asked for the site to be linked on the city's main page. Now, moving on to correcting the record. Some claims being repeated are not accurate, and I'll answer them directly. No non-disclosure agreement was ever signed by me or by anyone in the city. No data center application has ever been submitted to Lynn Valley. No approval was ever promised to anyone. No annexation agreement was signed. No annexation was approved. I received no money, no promise of money, no job, no ownership interest, no lodging, no meals, and no compensation of any kind from Youthfront, any data center developer, Silverton Power, or anyone connected to these issues. A recent accusation refers to me and a buddy. If that means Councilmember Hemphill, he attended a public governmental meeting with me, and Topher was someone I had met briefly for the first time that same night. It's also been said that I've been hiding things and working in secret. The draft ordinance went up on a public website in June, before this council had adopted anything and before anyone asked me to. Every word of it is still there tonight. Anyone in this room can pull it up and read the whole thing. I'd only add that publishing a full draft before adopting anything is a standard I'd recommend to anyone doing this kind of work. That's my answer to that, and I'll leave it there.
Let me reiterate. They asked us to sign an NDA, and both of us said no, absolutely not.
There's one more thing I want to address, and this one isn't about me. When we published that overlay in June, we published it as a draft before adoption, before this council had voted on anything, and we asked for feedback on it. That is what a draft posted for public comment is for. What came back was criticism for having published it at all. What did not come back was a suggested change. Nobody sent an edit. Nobody wrote to say the setback was too short or the decibel limit was wrong or that we'd missed a provision. The document said open for comment, and no comment on that document arrived. And among the things that were said was that the city couldn't match wits with the lawyers a data center company would bring. I take offense to that, and not on my own behalf. Lynn Valley is a community of people who have run businesses, raised families, served in the military, built things, fixed things, and made hard decisions with real consequences attached to them. There are people on this council who know more about water systems and roads and municipal budgets than any attorney flying in from somewhere else ever will. The notion that this community isn't capable of reading a zoning ordinance and protecting its own interests is not something I'm willing to let stand unanswered. But I'll take the underlying concern seriously for a moment. Because beneath the insult, there is a real question, and it deserves a real answer. If someone genuinely believes the city would be outmatched, then the answer is not to stop thinking about it. The answer is to get help, hire a consultant who does this work for a living, retain specialized counsel, put professionals on our side of the table. That's precisely what I intend to recommend to this council later tonight. Then there's one more thing, and it's less about what's been said than about how it got decided. Nearly all of it has come from people who don't know me. It's been assembled from second-hand and third-hand accounts, from a document read in isolation, from a meeting somebody heard about afterwards. Intent has been inferred and then repeated as fact. And in 8 months, nobody asked what the overlay actually required, where there was a gap, and what someone knew it got filled in, but not by asking. I want to be careful here because I'm not saying anyone owed me that. Nobody has to check with the mayor before criticizing him. That's not how this works, and it should not be. But there's difference between forming a view and confirming one. When you have a gap in what you know, you can fill it with a question or you can fill it with an assumption. And when the assumption is about somebody's character, it's worth being certain which one you used. My phone number and my email are available to anyone. I'm at City Hall all day most Mondays and Thursdays, on top of my full-time job, I will add. My door is always open for questions or to help someone. That is not a rhetorical offer. Anyone in this room who believes I've done something wrong can ask me directly tonight or any day after, and I will answer. I would rather answer a hard question than a rumor. And what if somebody genuinely wants to know is what kind of person I am, not what I did in this one matter, but what I'm actually like to work with and work for? That information exists and it isn't hard to find. I've spent over 30 years in my profession. People who worked alongside of me, some of them across multiple companies, have put their names to public recommendations on my professional LinkedIn profile. They didn't write those for a council meeting. They wrote them years before any of this, and they signed their real names to them. I'm not asking anyone to weigh that against a conclusion they've already reached. I'm saying it's there if character is generally what's at issue. One more. That overlay has been described as a giveaway. It required a 1,000-foot buffer from the lake, prohibited cooling towers outright, and barred a single dollar of infrastructure cost from being shifted onto any of our ratepayers, any of you citizens. I'll walk through the rest of it later when we reach the TAI item under old business, but I'd ask people to read it before describing it. People are entitled to disagree with my decisions, to say I should have communicated better. I understand the argument that I should have publicly acknowledged the existence of the annexation discussion sooner, particularly once the draft was on the table. And I could have drawn the line between an exploratory conversation and an actual city proposal more clearly. That's a fair criticism, and I'll own it. What I won't accept is being called dishonest or corrupt as a statement of fact. Now I want to say something here that I'd rather not have to say from this chair. Outside this office, I work as a chief technology officer of a company. That's how I support my family. Work like that runs on trust. People hand you their systems, their data, and their money, and they do it because they believe you're honest. Accusations don't stay in the room where they're made, and they don't stay on a Facebook page. They get indexed, they come up in a search, a customer doing due diligence on a vendor, a business partner, my employer, a future employer, any one of them can type my name and find the word corruption sitting next to it. What they will not find in that same search is the consultation with our attorney to protect the city, or the NDA we refused to sign, or the annexation draft our lawyer rejected, or tonight's explanation. They find the accusation with no evidence attached and no context around it. In my line of work, that's often the end of the conversation. Nobody has to prove anything. There's no hearing and no chance to respond. They simply move on to the next vendor or the next candidate. And there is no record anywhere that the thing was ever resolved because a resolution doesn't travel the way an accusation does. So when someone states as fact that I was scheming, that I acted underhandedly, that I was secretly committed to a project, or that I tried to profit personally, that is not ordinary political rough and tumble. Those statements can follow me for years. They can cost me my job. They can affect where I'm able to work after that. And while I'm still sitting in this chair, they make it harder for me to do the job you elected me to do. Because every hour I spend answering them is an hour I'm not spending on the city's business. Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not asking anyone to stop criticizing me. Criticize the decisions. Say I moved too slowly or too fast. Say I should have told you sooner. I agree with part of that a minute ago. Question my judgment. That is a job, and I accepted it when I ran. But there is a difference between I think the mayor handled this badly and the mayor is corrupt. The first is politics, and it's fair. The second is a factual claim about my character, and when it's made without evidence, it does damage that no retraction ever fully undoes. I do not accept that as an unavoidable price of public service. I'll keep answering questions, providing records, and admitting mistakes. I will also keep correcting claims that are factually false, not to win an argument, but because the record is the only defense I have. Where I stand. I started out believing a carefully regulated project might strengthen our finances without harming the community. Lynn Valley leans heavily on what residents pay in property taxes, and I thought it was responsible to look at broadening that base so that every citizen and property owner's property tax would be lowered, utility bills would be lowered. But residents made clear the issue was not limited to whether a data center could be made quiet, safe, dark sky compliant, or financially beneficial. Many of you simply don't want the kind of development in Lynn Valley's future. On August 4th, I posted 2 informal Facebook polls on data centers east of US 69 and on battery storage systems. Displayed results were 6% yes and 84% no on battery storage near the Evergy substation, 7% yes and 85% no. Not scientific surveys, not binding votes, but the opposition was unmistakable, and it matched what people were telling me face to face. On August 5th, I withdrew my support. That same morning, I contacted the newspaper editor who had agreed to moderate a public forum on data centers and BESS and canceled it because I had decided to recommend the council stop considering these projects and move toward a ban. If I'd intended to keep quietly pushing this, I would not have canceled the forum I had already begun organizing. At the August 10th meeting, I said I do not believe the city should move forward with the TAI overlay for data centers or battery storage. I also said that no formal movement was intended that night because Richard was absent. Those aren't contradictory. Waiting for a full council before asking me for a vote is about timing. My position had not changed. Going forward, I've done early research on alternatives that could protect the youth front property from industrial use, acquisition, conservation easements, deed restrictions, a land trust, purchase options, park and recreation uses, and a coalition of governmental, tribal, nonprofit, and conservation partners. I want to be honest about the status of that. It's preliminary. I haven't contacted the tribe, a land trust, or any other partner, and I have nothing developed enough to bring to this council. Since August 10th, most of my time has gone to assimilating the record instead. I'm also changing how I communicate. I will no longer use Facebook as an official channel in my role as mayor, unfortunately. On Facebook, I want to say something about this because I don't want anyone thinking the decision came easily, and I don't want it mistaken for something that it isn't. When I ran for office, I ran on being open, honest, and transparent. That wasn't a slogan I picked because it sounded good. It's how I believe local government ought to work, and Facebook was a large part of how I tried to deliver it. It's where I posted updates. It's where I answered questions at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's where people who would never come to a council meeting could still see what their city was doing. For a town our size, it was the closest thing we had to a front porch. So let me be plain. I am very disappointed to be giving that up. I'm not doing it comfortably, and I'm not doing it gladly. It's a loss, and I feel it as one. But that space has stopped doing the thing it was good for. It is no longer somewhere this city can work through a hard question together. What gets rewarded there is the sharpest comment rather than the most accurate one. And every correction I make just feeds the next round. I'm not willing to keep pouring the city's business into something that turns into a fight. And I'll be honest about the rest of it. It has been detrimental to my own mental health and to my family's. My family didn't run for anything. They never put their name on a ballot. They've been dragged into this anyway. And they've had to sit and read things about someone they love, written by people who don't know him. I can accept a great deal as the cost of holding this office. I am not willing to keep exposing them to that, and I don't believe anyone in this room would ask me to. So the platform changes. The commitment I ran on does not. Official updates will go on the new city website. Residents can get updates by text or email, and critical notices by mail. Meetings and longer explanations stay on YouTube. You can call me, email me, text me, visit me at City Hall, or stop me on the street. Council meetings and every legally required public process remain open, exactly as they always have been. I am changing the platform, not ending the conversation. That's the whole of it. I explored an opportunity, investigated how to protect this city, sent the terms to legal review rather than accepting them, built a framework for public discussion, listened, changed my position, and started looking for alternatives. I want to say one more thing, and then I'd like us to move on. This is the last time I intend to walk through this timeline from this chair. The record is written, it's public, it has dates and documents behind it, and it will stand on its own whether or not I keep defending it. Anyone who wants to know what happened can read it. If a new claim is made about me that is false, I'll correct it once, in writing, and then I'll leave it there. But I'm not going to keep re-arguing what is already in the record. Doing that has already cost this city months of attention it needed for other things, and I'm not willing to spend any more of it that way. As for the overlay itself, it's not mine to drive. What happens with the TAI question is at the discretion of this council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've given you my recommendation, it's in the minutes, and I will administer whatever this body decides. We'll take that up under old business, and after tonight, I'd like to get back to what I ran on. I ran on transparency, fiscal responsibility, economic development, and accountability. I'd ask people to measure what I've done against those four things rather than against what's been said about me. Transparency is why the entire framework went up on a public website, the draft ordinance included, before this council had adopted anything at all, and why I reported that trip publicly rather than waiting to be asked about it. Fiscal responsibility is why I looked at whether the city could broaden its tax base that currently rests almost entirely on what our own residents pay. It's also why that draft required a net fiscal analysis before any project could proceed and barred a single dollar of infrastructure costs from being shifted onto our citizens. Economic development is why I was willing to examine the question in the first place, and accountability is listening to the residents, changing my position when they made it clear, and standing up here to tell you the parts I got wrong. I'm not asking anyone to score that in my favor. I'm asking that it be weighed on those terms. There's a great deal of work in front of this city, and I'd like to spend the rest of my term on that. And that's the record, and that's the last of it. Now to the actual business of the city. On an exciting note, for me anyway, the new city website is live at lynnvalley.gov. That's lynnvalley.gov, no KS in it. I'd like everyone to go take a look at it, and more than that, I'd like people to use it. There are a few things on there worth finding tonight. Stay informed that you signed up and get notices by email so the city information comes to you instead of you having to go hunting for it. There's TextMyGov if you'd rather have it by text. Report a concern is there for a street light out, a pothole, a drainage problem, anything you normally have to track somebody down about. Ask the city is for questions, and those questions come to us directly, and you can pay your bill right on the site. I want to be straight with you about the state of it. There is content on there that still needs updating, and there are things that still need fixing. We are not finished. The old site at lynnvalleykansas.com is still up while we make certain everything has been moved across, so nothing gets lost in the transition. But the new address is the one to use going forward and the one to bookmark. If you find something wrong on it, I generally like to know. I put a lot of my own blood, blood, sweat, and tears into it, used report of concern to tell us. That seems like a fitting way to break it in. And I'll connect this to something that I said a few minutes ago. I'm stepping away from Facebook as the official channel. This is a large part of what replaces it. Stay informed, text MyGov, report a concern, ask the city. Those are direct lines to the city that don't run through anybody's comment section, and they reach staff who can actually do something about what you're telling them. That's my report. I'm happy to take questions from council or anybody else.